And welcome back to the Gilbertson Aero Factory. Today is Sunday, the 25th of June, 2023, probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Really hot, really humid. I've been out here for about 30 or 45 minutes because I wanted to use Home Built Help's tip for torquing the flare nut. And that's the video that I shared the link to in yesterday's video. So I went back and I changed my methodology and did that flare nut. I'm happy with it, which means that now that that's kind of done, I'm going to go ahead and get into the business of all the cleaning and prep that I need to do because we're going to use Pro Seal today. So I'm a sloppy mess right now, and I'm going to go inside and actually clean up so I can make a mess feeling fresh as a daisy. So until then, stand by because we're going to build an airplane. Not too much to say about this. The work is clamped to the table. I've used a little block of wood to match the height of the sender so that I can clamp it down and keep that sender caged so it doesn't rotate when I torque the AN fitting. And then by using the crow's foot at a 90 degree to the center of rotation, I can use the true torque value rather than doing that math that I did before. So put on the anti-rotation bracket and we're good to go. Let's see if I can keep up with the play-by-play on 4.5 hours of work. First off, I'm going to throw the stats up here. This was an extremely hot and uncomfortable day. That book you see that I have there, the Standard Aircraft Handbook, before I referred to it as AC 4313. It is not AC 4313. It contains the information that is in AC 4313, and specifically what I'm looking at on this day is torque values, I think, for the AN fittings, flare nuts, and whatnot. So this is just getting into the prep for all of this stuff. Those ribs, the flanges of those ribs have all been prepared long ago, which means they're definitely due for another cleaning. All of this stuff has been handled so much, so need to make sure that there aren't any oils from my skin on there and other debris and whatnot that's going to prevent the sealant from getting a good bite and sealing completely. And then a lot of tiny little bits, washers and anodized nuts and whatnot that I'll try to get a scuff on so that because those will be sealing up as well where those fuel line fittings go through the inboard rib. Having that acetone wash bottle is a big game changer for me. I can say that this day working, so here I did some things a little bit differently today when I worked with the Pro Seal, and that is I followed some of the tips from Austin Mankey's recent working with Pro Seal video. He finished his fuel tanks a few weeks ago on his RV-10, and he made a pretty good video about it, so I'll put a link to that in the description below. But the wash bottle makes a big difference in being able to sort of keep yourself in your work area and your work material clean while you're going about it. Those washers, they're so small it's hard to get a good scuff on them. So you see that I just have basically a whole Scotch-Brite pad on the near table, and instead of trying to take a pad and scuff the washers, I take the washers and scuff the pad. The other thing that I did differently, since we've got a minute to talk here, is he made a suggestion. Well, he used and had some success with these large syringes, and that was also a recommendation from my technical counselor. So I went to a feed store and picked one up. Austin says they're reusable. I'll find out if it's reusable for me today. But it really did work great and made the application, especially the application of the sealant on these end ribs, is different than
what we are ordinarily used to doing with all of the interior ribs, because we're not covering the entire rib. We're just putting a single unbroken bead that's going to be inside of the rivet line. We're sealing the tank from the inside out. Those rivet holes are outside of the tank. Therefore, we're not putting sealant over the, at least I'm not. Many don't. Some do. Some put sealant on every bit of it. So I'm mixing up an ounce and a half of, basically an ounce and a half of the base. So then 1.5 or 0.15 ounces of the accelerant, getting it all mixed up, and then getting it loaded into that syringe. That actually takes a little while. Looks fast here. This is sped up by a factor of 25. There you see applying a bead all the way around inside the line. And then I'm not going with the popsicle stick and troweling it out. I'm keeping it where it is. Just like all those other ribs, man, this thing went in like magic. I feel very fortunate that it went that way. You saw me taping up over those larger holes on the end. That's where the splice strip is, or that's where this piece is going to mate up with the splice strip. So that's to save my cleanup. I have a different kind of cleanup now, because now that that piece is on, it's tough to judge where that rib is exactly going to land. So there are little bits of tape that are probably like a 64, just under the edge of the flange of that rib, which doesn't matter at all, but it'll bug me. So I'm going to have to get in there with a pick and get that cleaned out. But other than that, this is a fairly clean process. In fact, you can see that I'm not even wearing gloves at this point. Using the squeezer to get all of these rivets set around the outside, because that is an area that is mostly clean. There's a little bit of squeeze out or squeeze through. Then just going in and doing the filleting, it came out nice and clean. I think that before I finish up entirely and put the baffles on, I'm going to go through both tanks and, for safety's sake, just add a clean bit of extra sealant in all of the typical problem areas that people have to deal with. Okay, so this is the inboard rib of the left tank. There, I'm applying the sealant around the outside. You saw me, though, a moment ago, securing that doubler on the inside with those two little 1097 rivets that I did, so that I can get that doubler installed before the attach bracket goes on. And then later, this goes in just like the other one, really easily. It rivets really easily. Later, after this, I get into the business with the fuselage attach bracket, which is where the flop tube fitting is going to go through and everything. And that I had a little bit more trouble with. If you recall, since we've put that big 9/16 hole in there for the AN fitting to pass through that in the nose of the rib, two of our rivet holes were covered up by the washer, so those had to be countersunk and done with flush rivets. A problem is, and this probably would have been a problem. No, a problem is that the rivet hole that is closest to that piece of angle where the angle goes, makes its 90-degree bend and goes up, is properly placed, but not for a flush set. For a flush riveting set, you can't get that down in there because it's too close to it. So you can't do that flush rivet. So that hole is completely covered up by that washer. So if I wanted to, I could just leave that hole open. It will be sealed from the inside with Pro Seal and that thing is clamped on pretty tightly, but I don't think that it would be a problem structurally if that wasn't there. That being said, I do have flush or countersunk pull rivets, and so that's the solution in that spot, just for that added bit of security. But that's what I'm working on down on that far end, is trying to solve that whole problem. And then the other thing that I did was, this is also time to do two other things, which is to install that, and actually install that fitting in the flop tube, and then to connect the AN fitting for the vent line. AN fitting for the vent line, that went fine. It's connected and it's all buttered up, because you put Pro Seal on the washer and the nut and the flange of the fitting, all the little bits that are going to create the seal where that thing passes through the web of that rib. And then up front, the AN fitting for the flop tube, got that all in and torqued down and happy with it. And then realized I made an error in the order of operations there. That one, you need to have the the fitting torqued onto and set onto the flop tube before you install it inside the tank. So I had to take that back out and clean all those parts back off. And then sit down in my office where it's nice and cool and learn how to safety wire, because that is, for the flop tube, the solution to the potential that flare nut would back off and leave you wishing that you had a fuel pickup that was actually connected inside your tank. And so I'll add that to the end of this video right here. And you saw me that I broke out the handbook there again, just to triple check the torque values. And I think that's what, see, right now I'm doing the AN fitting for the vent line, which is much smaller than the fuel pickup itself, so it's a lighter torque value. I was just double checking in the book. But yeah, you'll see me here in a second remove the flop tube fitting up in the very front there, and then put it in a little jar of acetone and start swishing those little bits around so I can clean them up and work on them. And that's where I'm going to pick up the work today. So here's how that safety wire stuff went. Happy to be inside where it's feels like 120 degrees. Getting the elbow fitting torqued on there. And this is what I'm trying to achieve. I need to put the safety wire on here in a way that is going to prevent that flare nut from ever loosening up and backing off. So there's a specific way that this needs to be done so that safety wire is effectively pulling in the right direction. I've never worked with safety wire or safety wire pliers before, so sitting here in front of my computer is a good place to learn. Total mystery to me until I learned it, and it's actually not that difficult to do. It's kind of fun, to be honest. So I think I went through 3 iterations as I learned how to do this. You see me looking at somebody else's build log to see what the final result looks like as compared to the drawn graphics in the plans. I think that this whole little bit right here, from the time I sat down till the time I was completely done with it, was about 22 minutes. And the third and final version of this that I did that I was happy with and that was correct was maybe a minute and a half. And that's a rank amateur. So working with safety wire. Now, I will say that I'm working with safety wire where I have it right there in my hands. And I can manipulate it in any way that I want. I'm sure that once we get into other situations where things are all bolted on and awkward, I might not feel as good about it. But yeah, it turned out pretty good. So that thing is now ready to go inside the airplane. I think I've got a closer final look at it. That's the penultimate iteration. The next one coming up here, this is the real winner, I promise you. Yeah, that needed to be done. This all needed to be done before I put that fitting through the rib and the fuselage attach bracket and torqued it all down. So in the little iPhone video you'll see, you can kind of still see little hints of the Pro Seal that was all over that piece maybe 30 minutes before we did all this. So my hands are still sticky from getting all of that cleaned up. But that's a wrap on episode 78, and we'll continue today. Thanks for being here.